All right, everyone. So thank you very much for joining us for our final presentation. We are Team 3 for Capstone B. My name is Sydney, and I'm going to be starting us off today. Also on the team, we have Cameron Bales, Olivia Anastasi, and Mackenzie Marshall. With that, we will move into talking about our presentation and the jobs to be done. So the job to be done that we decided to do was finding efficient ways to make payment transactions between merchants and consumers. Now, when we initially were looking at this, we diagnosed it in terms of the moment of struggle, which was businesses being cash only. We've all been there where you go to pay for something, you see cash only, and you either have to find an ATM or you just have to choose something else and miss out on the service because you don't have enough cash. So this really involves two main parties, the consumers and the merchants. Now, when you consider the job to be done compared to the moment of struggle, they're not exactly the same thing. But when you go down to the root cause of why people end up having the moment of struggle, it is because of the initial job of there not being a convenient way to make a transaction between the merchant and the consumer. So in this situation, the consumer moment of struggle is from the merchant's moment of struggle. So that's a little nuance that we went through and when we consider designing our product. So a little bit more on the moments of struggle and how this comes about. So the biggest issue with this is, why are businesses cash only? Obviously, we know that a lot of businesses accept credit card, they accept PayPal, they accept Samsung and Apple Pay. But what about the businesses that aren't? So the biggest issue for cash-only businesses are, especially for a smaller business, integrating a credit card can be quite difficult. The bank has a really long application process that needs to be monitored, and sometimes you don't get a good rate from that. The second part of this is that businesses may look to do an independent sales organization in order to get credit card payments set up. This is also known as an ISO. But sometimes these tend to have hidden fees and lengthy contracts. Another thing that businesses will tend to run up against are back-end compliance issues that they need to deal with when it comes to offering credit card payments. So for example, PCI compliance is something that they have to deal with, but they might not know it, and that's another reason why they say, this is too complicated. And then finally, touching again, credit card fees end up making it difficult for the merchant. Whenever someone makes a credit card payment, the merchant has to pay a fee, and ultimately this can end up being a lot. So this process for getting a credit card implemented into a business is not the easiest. This can end up being very, very bad for small businesses. So based on our research, about 1 in 3 Americans can't even make a $20 cash payment without first accessing an ATM. About 22% of respondents from an initial survey that we used said that they don't carry any cash. And this further increases when you start looking at the younger millennial generation. Another thing too is that even if individuals have cash, about 55% of people actually had a negative outlook of a business if they were cash only. They either said that it was outdated or that it was inconvenient. And they just said, this is not our problem. We're just going to go somewhere else that can be up with the times. So not only do you miss out on sales, you also look at having a really bad reputation of your business from not doing the most basic things as accepting credit card payments. So this is really the moment of struggle and the root problem and the job to be done that we look to solve. And with that, I will pass it over to Olivia to discuss our product, Apple Merchant.
Wonderful, Cindy. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Anastasi, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about what Apple Merchant is, the product that we've been working on, and how it works. So, Sydney, if we could advance the slides here. Okay, so Apple Merchant is a point of sale and software combination. It allows the owners of small to medium-sized businesses accept all sorts of payments rather than just accepting cash, which can be rather limiting to them and their business. We wanted to find a way to allow these small and medium-sized business owners to be able to accept all sorts of different types of payments to increase their revenue and profits. We also wanted to make it easier for consumers so that they can feel confident in the fact that no matter where they're shopping, especially if they're supporting local businesses, that their preferred method of payment will be accepted there. So we're primarily targeting electronic payments here. As you'll see on the next slide, which we'll get to in a moment, it was important for us to include a dashboard that was user-friendly, transparent, easy to find, all sorts of different information that's important to you when making the decision whether to purchase a product or service. And then we also did a lot of research and a lot of surveying on our pricing structure. We know that's one of the most important attributes that both merchants and customers are looking at when implementing a point of sale system. And so we're going to get into some of those details here as we move forward. So Sydney, if we could advance to the next slide. So here's a little bit about that dashboard that I mentioned just a moment ago. We wanted to make sure that this was really user-friendly for both merchants and consumers alike. So on the dashboard, it looks like kind of like an iPad that you would normally use at home. You're able to see all of your transactions. So you can see your receipts, your invoices for any business day, week, quarter, year, however you'd like to break that down, whatever makes sense for your business. You're able to find that there on the point of sale system. Lots of wonderful reporting tools as well. There's ways that you can manage your budget, track your spending, all in one place. So again, we wanted to provide all these different tools just to add value to our consumers and those that'll be using this system. We'll also store all of your payment methods in a very secure manner. So we'll see what credit and debit cards and bank accounts that you have available for use. And then customer support was another major factor for us, and something that we really asked a lot about in our surveys, what consumers preferred as far as customer support goes. And one of the wonderful things about being a part of Apple is having access to that wonderful human interaction with customer support that we'll get to here in just a moment. So Sydney, if we could go ahead and advance to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the initial surveys that we conducted. We wanted to make sure that the product that we were building provided value, that the jobs to be done that we were targeting really were problems for the consumers. And we wanted to make sure that we were identifying and fixing those problems. So if we go ahead and advance to the next slide, we can see some of those initial results that we received from some of the first surveys that we had conducted. So what we initially found was that having the ability to swipe, tap, or insert a card as well as using cash was a preference. We also found that human customer service and support was preferred over chatting with a robot online, or oftentimes getting stuck in an automated loop by calling an 800 number. So we knew those were things that we wanted to avoid when setting up this point of sale system through Apple. We also found that visual data dashboard that we just showed you a moment ago that met the needs and wants of the merchants. And so we wanted to make sure not only was it user friendly, but that it was customizable, that we were providing our merchants, our customers, with the information that they wanted, and just making sure that that was readily accessible for them on that dashboard on the actual system itself. So if we could go ahead and move forward to the next slide here, we're going to talk a little bit more about our initial survey results. So as we mentioned before, having the ability to swipe, tap, or insert a card, especially during the ongoing pandemic, reducing the interaction with another human face-to-face and just being able to tap your card was a priority amongst those who responded to our survey. We also wanted to make sure the dashboard showed total costs as well as receipts, invoices, and forecasts. We found that, again, a human representative was preferred over an automated system, and that a flat fee was actually preferred over a percentage. So we're going to get into more of that as we go along here. Sydney, if you're okay with advancing to the next slide here. We wanted to kind of compare our product with one of our biggest competitors in this space. And so we looked to Square, which serves a similar purpose as what we're after. And we just wanted to compare how we would fare against them, especially when it comes to price. And what we found was that if we could keep our prices low, oftentimes we would beat out our competition just with our customer service, our customization, with the dashboard that we've created for this product. And so our our system was often preferred over our customers as long as we could keep prices low. We found that we had more utility in our initial survey, which was really nice to see. So if we could go ahead and move to my final slide here, just kind of jumping more into different results again as we compare our Apple Merchant product with that of Square, one of our biggest consumers. We know that one of the most important attributes for our customers and our merchants was price. And so it's really important for us to be transparent in the way that we assess our cost for using this service, and make sure that we can keep costs low as it compares to a lot of our competitors. And using Apple, using the resources that Apple provides, we'll be able to do that moving forward. So if we could go ahead and move on to the next slide here. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Mackenzie Marshall, who will be presenting on the next couple of slides we have available. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Olivia. Next, I'm going to walk through stage 3 of the AVID methodology, which is the second survey that our team completed. And if you don't mind, thanks, Sydney. With this, we ran a 100-person survey that gave respondents an option of our product attributes compared to our competitors. We determined that the respondents preferred Apple products over the 3 largest competitors in this space, which are Clover, PayPal, and Square. A 1.5% transparent fee that our product offers was also preferred over competitors because it is significantly lower. And Sydney, if you don't mind going to the next slide, please. Thank you. Here are the survey results. And as you can see, Apple Merchant was favored by the respondents compared to both Square and Clover by a good amount. One of the main things we learned from the survey is that Apple is by far a more favored brand than any of our competitors. Our solution is the better solution compared to competitors due to brand recognition and the trust of the Apple brand. Also, the no hidden fees and the customer service options also help with our service. Sydney, if you don't mind, next slide, please. Here, we really wanted to focus on the brand. So as you can see in the chart, the Apple brand was heavily favored over PayPal, Clover, and Square. This confirmed our assumption that we could really rely on the Apple brand to help sell the Apple Merchant product. And to the next slide. For switch dynamics, Apple Merchant primarily targets cash-only businesses or businesses that don't want to switch to take credit card due to the fees that they would incur, as Sydney mentioned earlier. This then causes an expense to their business. Since we have lower fees, we are hoping to get them to switch to us due to the lower expense to them. Since we have differential value from our competitors, we are also hoping to gain customers who are currently using Square and Clover, because when they see that Apple is coming out with Apple Merchant and all of the capabilities that it has, we're hoping they'll switch to us due to the brand recognition and the fact that Apple products are well trusted. Next slide, please, Sydney. Thank you. So our differential value, as mentioned before, Apple is a preferred brand compared to any competitors in the market. People know what they are getting when they buy an Apple product. Apple is also known for their security measures, so businesses would know that they could trust their Apple product to be secure, especially when dealing with payment information. Apple Merchant would also integrate well with other existing Apple technology, and customers of Apple Merchant who have other Apple products would know how strong Apple's customer service department is, which would be the same customer service department that's available to them if they were to have any issues with the Apple Merchant software or the hardware itself. Apple Merchant offers an interactive dashboard right on their POS system, so businesses can view sales, expenses, and forecasts without having to use another software or another product. Sydney, if you don't mind advancing the slides. Next, I'm going to talk about the business ecosystem risks and the mitigation strategies for these risks. For co-innovation risk, we ranked ourselves a low to moderate risk. Apple Merchant really relies on their suppliers to help supply the raw materials needed to make their POS system. They also rely on the logistics companies to ship and distribute the final POS systems. With this, we decided we were able to mitigate these risks pretty well, so we gave them a low to moderate ranking. For adoption change risk, we went moderate to high risk. The biggest risk for our product in this area comes from the credit card companies and also the logistics companies that we utilize. The credit card companies could decide to raise interest rates or decide not to do business with Apple Merchant anymore. And for the logistics partners, if we have a big spike in sales and then there's increased shipping costs because we are trying to ship more than we had anticipated, that's another risk. So how are we going to mitigate these risks? To mitigate these risks on the co-innovation side, we can ensure we have backup suppliers identified and potentially have contingent contracts with them. So in case something goes wrong with our main supplier or they run out of materials for a certain amount of time, we are still able to develop and produce our product without any type of scheduling delays or issues. And to mitigate the logistics issue, Apple Merchant is going to use multiple carriers. So if shipping is delayed with one of the carriers, it won't affect all of the POS systems. So we may only be a handful behind versus not being able to ship anything at all. For the adoption change risk, to mitigate the credit card company risk, we are going to negotiate rates with them ahead of time to avoid unforeseen spikes and also make sure that we have a contract in place with them that they can't break without coming to us and communicating their issues first. And then Apple Merchant, as I mentioned before, has a lot of options when it comes to logistics companies. So we are able to mitigate the logistics risk pretty well just by having different contracts with our different logistics partners. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Cameron to talk about financial analysis and wrap up our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie. So with regards to the financial analysis, let's first start with the revenue. So what is depicted on the screen is our first year revenue. We did a market analysis in which we found that there are 13.9 million point of sale systems in the United States. We assume we'll capture 10% of this market in the first year, 3% of which will be from non-Apple users. So these are Android or PC customers previously. Then we also have 5% of these customers will be looking for a POS bundle. So this would include scanners and other items that were shown previously in this presentation. And then the remaining 92% will be existing Apple customers who just want to have this POS system to be able to sync with their existing products and to use in their businesses. So with regards to the pricing model, for these Android and PC customers, they'll pay $1,000 for the POS system. Existing Apple customers would pay $850, and then those looking for the bundle would only pay $500 based on their bulk deal. Multiplying these percentages that I mentioned before of the 1.39 million times the pricing structure gives you the amount of revenue you will receive for each one individually, the full price to Apple in the small bundle, equating to 1.16 billion. Then we also charge 1.5% of the revenue to do a lot of the background work. So multiplying the 1.39 million times the average small business revenue, which is $205,250, we come to the $4.27 billion. So summing that together brings us to a total revenue of $5.44 billion in the first calendar year. So as far as the cost structure is concerned, we have rental costs for buildings, mainly overseas, but some also in California. Then we have insurance, which is $100,000 a month times 12 months, giving us the 1.2 million. The wages for hourly employees is 10,000 Chinese employees times $3, which is the maximum minimum wage in China, times a 40-hour work week times 50 weeks. Then personal protective equipment consumables is a little bit over 20 million. The shipping cost is 1.6 billion. Then transitioning to direct costs, we have the wages of those not working directly on assembly lines. So this is more administrative. That'll equate to 50 million. The direct development of the POS system software would be about $1,000 per unit. So that gives us the 1.39 billion. Physical development is about half of that, $500 per the first annual units. So just shy of 700 million. Packaging expense, about 35 million. Material costs, 200 million. Training costs, 1.5 million, because we already have a pretty well-trained staff and customer support. And then finally transitioning to the indirect costs, we have the marketing costs, security costs, and entertainment expenses. So we sum to about $4.1 billion in costs. So our revenue minus cost, giving us our profit, which is 1.3 billion, is basically in line with our target of 25%. So you have the 5.44 billion minus the 4.08, giving you the 1.36. This is a similar amount to 2% of increase compared to Apple's 2020 annual revenue. So how are we able to do this? So like I mentioned before, we did market studies to see what the demand is in the current market. And there are 13.9 POS systems just in the US alone. There are also 31.7 small businesses with that average of $205,000 in annual revenue. And then Apple also boasts about 50% market share. They've been between 45% and 50% over the last decade. So we assume we can capture a similar market overall for point of sale systems. This is a graphic showing the breakdown of the US small businesses, the 31.7 million that I discussed before, based on their percentage allocation with their dollar range revenue annually. So there's also the bargaining power of buyers. Apple has consistently always heavily invested in research and development to be ahead in the market, especially when it comes to electronics. They have a lot of extra capital, so they can afford additional expenditures. We've seen such products come out besides even the iPhone, which was revolutionary basically a decade ago. We have AirPods, Apple Watches, and likewise items, and this leads to the brand loyalty and profits that we aforementioned earlier in the presentation. So we can go to the next slide. So there's also, on the flip side, the bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers have a relatively weak fight against Apple. Apple has basically power over any supplier for any component that go into its products, whether it be recycled metals or microchips or what have you. Their sheer size makes it hard for suppliers to compete, especially since there are more suppliers than there are substantial electronic companies on the scale that Apple is. So the ability for Apple to switch between suppliers makes it relatively hard for suppliers to really try to negotiate against Apple. So if there are any questions, you can feel free to put them in the comment section below after we have posted this for you guys to review. And then we have a couple of backup slides with additional information that we discussed in the presentation, if you would like to move to those, Sydney.
I think this one doesn't have the backup slides. I think we took them out since we were pretty close, but.
Well, you could crop that very last part out. At least it was like the last 10 seconds. I feel like that would be a fairly easy crop.
That sounds good. If not, we'll just thank Richie for being an awesome instructor and upload it all, but I'll see if I can crop it. So I'm gonna stop recording now.